always start with the core three, which is piano, bass, and drums, just whatever. It's kind of what you want to start with musical theater. And then we added guitar, which will give you that James Bond kind of, Peter Gunn kind of sound, So that was our fourth instrument. And then the other two we used trumpet and reed. Listening to a lot of the spy music from the 60s, there's sort of like two main elements from that. There's a lot of string stuff, and there's also a lot of brass stuff. If you're going to add strings, you need like 15 of them. So we went with, the two brass players, the trumpet and the reed player playing flute and tenor sax and bari sax, which is very typical of that style of music. This is the program Finale, which is the notation program that I used for this project. Right now we have number 11 open, which is You Don't Have a Clue. It might be hard to see on the screen, but what you'll see here is the vocal lines on the top. There's a Henry line, which happens later on. This is where the reeds are, the trumpet, the guitar. This is an empty staff I use for cueing. And then here's the piano part, the bass, and the drums. And then this bottom score is actually what I imported from Masi's files. So these are the actual original piano line that Masi had written. And this one, you got this groove, doom, da doom, 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 doom. That's sort of like the base of this song. And then you want to add the drums on top of that, so you figure out what drum beat you want to go with it. And then you just start filling it in, from there. You actually see the green line following the music. In this show, what I tried to do was make the keyboard play instruments that would have been available in the 60s. I also tried to avoid using quote-unquote real instruments like violins and other brass instruments, just because personally I'm not a big fan of synthesizing orchestral instruments. I think it sounds cheesy. There's harpsichord, there's organ, there's a couple different organs actually. Oh, and the other instrument I used a lot was celeste. This is Time Will Tell. Heard a little bit of the recordings from Finale playing it, and why would we not want to use that? It's a computer playing the songs, which is what a MIDI recording is, and which has a lot of limitations. For example, I'm going to play the beginning of If I Didn't Have You. You can hear how static it is. And then this just sounds stupid. This is a swing, but it's like it's a computer. I always count Altar Boys as one of my favorite experiences because it was one of the first shows that I did in New York, and if you never saw Altar Boys, it was so much fun to play as well. But some of my favorite Broadway stuff that I've done is, I was a sub over at Xanadu. When you sub a show, literally you go in and you just play with no rehearsal. You just have to learn it on your own and go in and do it exactly right. And it's the same thing for conducting. Probably the most stressful thing I ever did was sub-conduct at Legally Blonde. It's a big score. You're playing and conducting. It's complicated. There's 17 instruments in the orchestra. There's a huge cast. So you're sitting in the middle of the theater with no rehearsal. There's like a huge audience behind you waiting to start the show, and you're like, okay, here we go. Maybe the first thing to do is just kind of gain an understanding of the style of music. So anything you can do to kind of listen to the James Bond era stuff, even some of the pop songs from the 60s, that'll help you stylistically, get there. As far as, reading notes, it's just reading notes.